Hello, you guys, and welcome to Nicole. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Um, this is going to be a good one. I already know this is going to be a good one, so stay tuned. You hear me? I am here with Miss Chynna. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and she's going to tell you what it is that she is doing at this moment. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Introduce yourself to the people.
I'm Chynna Presley. Currently, I am the Economic Security Specialist for the Women's Fund. I'm also a business owner for China Monet, and there's another one in there, but we're putting it under the umbrella of China Monet. So.
Okay, so what is the Women's Fund?
The Women's Fund is a nonprofit that we serve the community. So it's under the Community Foundation. It's under the umbrella of the Community Foundation. We do work, and this is so extensive, so let me take it back. We do work in 3 different areas. So taking it back a couple of years ago, a study was done on the greater Fort Wayne area to figure out what is the state of the woman in Fort Wayne. The last time, I'm gonna ask you if you know this, okay. You probably don't. Most people don't. The last time this study was done, before 2020 or so, when do you think the study was done before the last one we did?
It probably was too long ago, which means probably early 1900s.
It was 1974. It was the last time the state of the woman had been studied at all for our area. Wow. So that means that our information about how much a woman makes in the workplace to be able to support herself and her family had not been studied since 1974. How much a woman needs in terms of safety and security in our area had not been studied since 1974. So we had very outdated metrics to help the women in our community. So from that study, and the report is available online, but from that study, we figured out that there are 3 main areas that we need to focus on. So we have personal safety, economic security, and young women and girls. And so the area that I get to work on is the economic security. So the Women's Fund, like I said, we have a lot of different initiatives that we do. Take Girl to Work Day is an opportunity where 6th grade girls from all 4 school districts get a chance to do a half a day where they go to different companies where we have women in leadership positions. Oh, wow. And they get to learn about different industries that they could potentially be a part of. It's kind of a hands-on day, so they get to do some sort of activity at each one of those companies. And then we put them back on the buses and they come down to the Grand Wayne for a big luncheon. So I do a little celebration. We teach them networking. We work with some other nonprofits to be able to make that happen. We have women in the workplace. So we do a compass survey where different companies elect to take a survey about their policies and their benefits and different things that, tell us about the success of the women in their company. So we measure leadership, benefits, recruitment, and compensation. And so those 4 areas are measured against national metrics. And then we obviously use some of our local metrics to make sure that it's, where it needs to be. And we do a luncheon once a year where we give away awards for those companies who have hit some of those metrics. Wow. In one of those 4 areas or up to all 4. So the first year we did that, we had about 36 employers take the survey. Last year we had 50. This year we had 75. Wow. So it's continuing to increase, and we give out a scorecard where you can get to see who all is taking this, which tells us as women who is prioritizing our success, right? And then this year we are incorporating an individual scorecard for each one of the companies. So they'll get to see where they fare in each one of those categories. And then we also give them tips on how to improve for next year.
Awesome.
So
I
yeah,
didn't even know
there's a whole
that.
lot more.
I had no idea that that was being done, but I'm glad that it is.
Yeah, it's really good.
I'm glad that it is. Wow. Okay. Now, how did you end up with this position?
So I served on the Young Women and Girls Committee. So one of the really great things about the Women's Fund is that we are just a team of 3. And so a lot of
Really?
yes,
Wow.
and that's new as of me joining the team.
Wow.
So a lot of the work that we do cannot be done without the help of community volunteers. So we have committees, and these are community volunteers, women and men who are in the community who really want to help create systemic change in those 3 areas that I mentioned earlier.
Mm.
So I was serving on the Young Women and Girls Committee because I was working for another organization as an interim director, and took her seat when I took that position. And then after I was done with that stint, I stayed on the committee, and 2 years later, Cassie, the Women's Fund director, came to me and she said, "Hey, I have this job that I'm going to be posting soon. I really would like for you to apply for it if you're interested."
Wow.
So that's how I ended up with the role. I mean, obviously, I had to go through the interview process and everything, but I was grateful to Cassie for whispering in my ear because she knew I needed something, and this just seemed like the perfect fit for me.
Wow. Wow. And so do you feel like it has been?
Oh, 100%.
Awesome.
I have never been so happy.
Oh.
Never.
Oh. Now, do you feel like this position, was like a God inspired or well, you said Cassie just was like, hey, there's this position.
Yeah.
You might wanna,
I wouldn't.
do.
Everything I do, I believe, is God inspired, right?
Okay.
My faith drives everything I do. Now, can I say that that's how the position was created? No, it's not a. It's not a Christian organization. It's not a faith-based organization. But we have good people in these positions who care about our community, and I think the way that we came together was God inspired for sure.
Mm.
Um, I have a lot of respect for Cassie and Patty, the 2 women that I work with, and they have done great work, and they continue to do great work. And I think the position itself, like I said earlier, it was a perfect fit for me.
Awesome.
It's a culmination of a lot of the things that I've done in my career.
Okay. Now I was looking at a little bit of your bio on LinkedIn, and it said that you were involved in domestic violence awareness.
Mm.
Now, where does that come from? Why?
Okay, so my first job in Fort Wayne, I was an education coordinator for the YWCA.
Okay.
So that's what brought me to Fort Wayne in the first place.
Okay.
So the education coordinator position was in charge of communicating with people in 6 counties in Northeast Indiana about domestic violence. Not just the services that we provide, but also just education on understanding what domestic violence is, how it presents itself in ways other than just physical violence.
Mm.
Part of my story is that while I was in that job, I met my my husband. I'm now divorced, but I actually, as an educator in domestic violence services, ended up meeting my abuser while I was doing those services.
Wow.
So while I was communicating this to other people, I felt like such a hypocrite.
Mm.
I was trying to excuse away a lot of the red flags that I saw. And now I see myself as an advocate in a different way. I have a personal story, and this is not to bash him whatsoever. I think most of this story has to do with how I handled the situation, how I overlooked a lot of the flags that could have prevented me from walking into this relationship. I was young, I was insecure, I was naive, and the love bombing really took me over. And so at this point in my life, I have tried to utilize my public speaking to amplify the voices of other victims while telling my story as well. I think that there's another connection that I can make there. And then I think the other part of that is it's really important to shine a light on the fact that I am not who you think of when you think about domestic violence, simply because of the way that I show up, the way that I present in the community, because of how beautiful our family seemed on the outside, right? And because I was a professional, we tend to miss the people who are in the middle, the people who are going to work in a decent job every single day, the people who, again, look so beautiful on the outside, the family. I mean, it's a beautiful family. And we helped so many other people in our community. So there's no way that anyone would assume that behind closed doors, we were going through the mess that we were going through. And I kept it quiet for so long because I had become a monster in that relationship as well. The way that I chose to deal with it, we have different ways of dealing with stress, right?
Yes.
Some of us flee. We have the flight.
I'm a flight.
I wish sometimes that I had been a fighter. Some of us fight. I became a fighter. I became somebody who decided to fight back. We have some people who are freezers, right? And I was not a freezer. In some cases, I guess I was, because I remained for so long. Because I didn't know how to expose what I was going through without exposing myself and the shame that I felt, the guilt that I felt, but also the responsibility I felt as a step parent, as a biological parent to a young child, to keep this family intact, and as a woman of faith, to keep the family intact. And I struggled for many years on how to do this well. And so it was hidden. And I think that a lot of women and men go through these situations where we are hidden in plain sight. And I think it's really important that I share my story, because not because it's important for people to know what he did, but it's important for people to know how I responded.
Yes.
And for them to know that they're not alone, That's my stance on where I'm at with domestic violence services, with advocacy. That's how I got into it. I got into it as an educator, and then unfortunately ended up becoming a victim. But at this point, I don't like to use that term. I would say that I'm a survivor of it, and in thriving, really, to be honest with you. Prevailing, I like that.
Prevailing. Right. I mean, and that's what people need to know, is that they too can overcome.
Absolutely.
They can be an overcomer of the same situation, because there are people who feel like they don't know how to get out. They don't know what to do next. They don't know how to handle, the situation that they're in, until someone like you comes along and is able to share with them. You can do it.
Absolutely.
You can do it. You can get out. You can continue to grow. You can continue to conquer and triumph in your life, regardless of what you've endured. So that is good. You wear many different hats.
I sure do.
I was looking back through your LinkedIn, like, okay, so where do we stay? And I don't know if we can stay at one particular spot, because you wear so many different hats. Have you found one of those hats more impactful than another, or is there one that drives you more? Is there
Let me explain it this way. I call myself a multi-potentialite. Okay. It's another way of saying a jack of all trades.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people misinterpret what a jack of all trades really is. So that phrase, and I'm going to mess it up, but yep, I'm going to mess it up. It's something along the lines of a jack of all trades
Master of none.
is better than a master of one. Yes, thank you. So the multi-potentialite is simply somebody that knows that they are gifted and skilled in doing multiple things.
Okay.
And I would not say that one thing is more impactful than another. What I will say is that I know my path is not, it's not linear. And everything I do is inspired by my faith. I believe that God has called me to be a nonlinear person. And with being a multi-potentialite, it's one of those things that you grab what catches you in that moment and you stick with it in that moment, knowing that God has gifted you for that thing in that moment, and then learning to release it and move on to the next when it's time. For the longest, I wanted to be somebody who could just choose one thing, one path, and stay on it. Because that's what that's what they tell us we have to do. And they tell us this from the time we are children. Choose what you want to be when you grow up. And I couldn't do it. One, because I didn't see other women who looked like me doing anything that I knew I could do. I grew up in a very small community that was mostly white, and I didn't see other women doing things, other Black women doing things. So my examples were Claire Huxtable's.
Right.
I remember the '92 Olympics when FloJo and the greats were dominating in track and field. And so those were the women that I looked to. I'm a culmination of all of those women because I pieced together who I wanted to be. And then as I got older, I started understanding it's not what I want to be, but it's who I want to be. And so I started to assign a purpose statement for myself. And I understood that because I am a nonlinear human being, because my path is not straight and that it goes twists and turns all the time, as long as I know my purpose, I can execute my purpose throughout any of these jobs, any of these things that I am called to do. I can execute that purpose. So there's not one thing that I think has been more impactful than another. I can say that there are other things, I can point to things, positions that I've held that have impacted me more than others. So when I was going through my divorce, or after my divorce, I started another job and I was working in higher education. I did not know that I had been affected by the loss of my relationship with my stepchildren until I stepped onto that campus and the students received me with such love that they gave me what I didn't know I was missing in that time, because they're around the same age as my stepkids. And so I would say that that was a point in my life where I was impacted more so than I think I impacted anybody else.
Wow.
So I try to take something from every single one of them. Another thing to understand about me, I can't answer that question just so succinctly because I have a very difficult time gauging what other people's perceptions of me are. I don't have that gauge. I just don't have it. And so I go through my life just doing what I know to do without any kind of feedback. So have I been impactful? I hope so. But I don't know unless somebody tells me. So
awesome. Now, how would you help other people maybe kind of tap into or locate where they probably should be, or their dream position or career, or
I say start with that purpose. Start with that purpose. And if you don't know what that purpose is, the way that I suggest finding it, What are the things that you do that you don't have to think about doing them? You just do them well, just naturally. What are those things that you do naturally? Now, understanding that our purpose has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with how we affect the world around us. So when you execute those skills flawlessly, because they're just what comes naturally, what is the feedback you receive from the people who have met you in that skill set, who have been affected by you executing those skills? When they tell you things like, you've impacted my life this way, when you did this, or when you said that, or whatever it is, this is how you've impacted me. That gives you a clue as to what you're supposed to be doing in this world. So I figured out that when I am executing things without thinking about it, when I'm doing these things that I know God has called me to do, people gave me the feedback that they felt like they had begun their healing journey. They gave me feedback that they felt encouraged, they felt empowered. Some of them even said they figured out what their purpose was. Wow. So with that, I now have my words for what is my purpose. Wow. My purpose on this earth is to help people heal from their past pains, to help encourage and empower others, and to help them find their purpose and live through it. That's the feedback I received, and I figured out that that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and I can execute that no matter what job I'm doing. I may be so unhappy where I'm at, but that doesn't mean that my purpose can't be fulfilled in that place. I actually have a tattoo. It's a date. It's 2/11/22, and it was a date that I was in a job. I was unhappy. I felt disrespected. I felt overused and underutilized. And I was planning 2 major events for this company. And in the midst of that, I'm sitting there kicking myself. Why didn't I go back to another job? They've called me several times and said that they would love to have me back. Why didn't I just go back? Why, and God kept telling me, I haven't called you to go back. This is where I've called you to be. In the midst of planning, and I'm kicking myself in my head, I was working at a university at the time. One of my students reached out to me over text and asked me for help instead of committing suicide that day. And in that moment, I realized I was the only person on that campus because of my social work background. I was the only person on that campus who knew the wraparound services, not just the emergency services, but what else that student needed after they got out of emergency services to keep them back on track, right? And that's when God said to me, Chynna, I didn't bring you here for your skill sets. Your skill sets are what got you in the door. I brought you here because your purpose is greater than your skill sets. I brought you here to catch my children. And so this date reminds me of that my purpose will always trump my skill sets. So it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you thought it was your dream job. God brought you there for a specific purpose, and you need to exercise that purpose. And once you exercise that purpose, He will release you to the next thing.
I hope somebody heard that. My goodness. Wow. Okay. Now I'm trying to figure out where to go now from there.
Take your time. Take your time. I'm getting all shaky. The Holy Spirit's moving. Let me take a drink.
I see you. Okay. So I'm going to ask you this one last question before I have you share what you shared before the interview.
Okay.
Stay tuned for this next part. You hear me? So a question I love to ask each person that I interview is if they have ever wanted to quit, where they are, and what did the moment look like? Because those answers have been so different.
Yeah.
I love hearing, because I want other people to hear, the answers. I want them to hear the no, and I want them to hear the yes, and why they continue to keep going.
Yeah.
You don't think so?
Well, I think I just gave you an example.
You did.
But there are multiple examples. Like you said, you went through my list of jobs that I've had. In 20 years, I've held a lot of different jobs. And a lot of it, I'm gonna be honest with you, most of them I did not want to leave. But I knew God was calling me to move. And so I had to answer that call. This isn't just a career thing. There have been many times in my life where I've wanted to quit. And if I'm gonna be real, which I think that's what you're asking of me, if we go back to the conversation about domestic violence, I'm just trying not to get emotional here.
It's okay.
I wanted to quit that marriage so many times. There are times where I look back and I think I could have been so much further in my life had I not married him. There were times that, and this is through, I can only say this out loud because of the times that I spent in my therapy sessions. My therapist helped me get to this point where I can say this out loud. I wanted to take my own life. I wanted to get out whatever way I possibly could. I was never somebody who dreamed of having children. I loved my stepchildren, and I had no desire to have biological children. I believe wholeheartedly that my daughter was given to me for two reasons. One, because God knows I need to have something to work on, right? And she has a huge calling on her life. And I feel an enormous responsibility to help her carry that out and to make sure her spirit is never crushed. But the other reason is to keep me alive. Because God knew that not only would I never risk taking my own life to take away the mother from a child, but I also struggled with thoughts of homicide as well, because I thought maybe that was the way out. There's a whole lot more to that story. And again, I would not have been able to say that out loud had I not had a therapist who knew it, because she knew that story herself. And she called it out with me before I ever had to speak the words. And so did I want to quit? Absolutely. I wanted to quit the earth. I wanted to leave so I would not have to experience the pain that I was going through. And I wouldn't have to continue to show up at work while I was showing up at home. I just wanted to be done. I wanted to be relieved of the stress and the pain. And I'm so grateful to have my daughter. She and I are very different people, and she has a lot of energy. And I know you guys think that I have a lot of energy, but I really don't. I'm an introvert through and through. And, I have medical issues. I've got a sleep disorder. I just want to go home and sleep. That's all I want. But I have a little girl who just keeps me going. And so, yeah, there were times where I've wanted to quit. In career, obviously, we all get there. And for me, again, it's the purpose that keeps me going. But in my personal life, I think that's one thing that it's important for me to share, because I know that the other people are out there dealing with that. And I want everybody to know you are not alone in that. You are not alone. And if you do ever get to that place, stop isolating yourself. It's the isolation that makes it worse. And so I'll go back to after I was out of that relationship, I had moved into my own home. A year or two after I had moved into my house, I was cleaning out a closet and I found an old journal. And I went back and I found the very first, like the years or the months, I should say, that we were dating. And then I found the first year. And in the first year, I was already begging God to release me from that marriage. And I had forgotten that with you. I had forgotten that in the 9 years that I was with him, every single year, I had begged God to release me. But again, sometimes it's not until our purpose has been fulfilled that he will release us. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I know that it was not easy for you to do. But somebody is gonna see it, and then they are, like you say, they do all the time, say that you can encourage them. You know, you've done that for someone else, so I believe you're doing it for me. You were just sitting here, so.
Well, you can thank God, because
Yes.
he told me it is not my story to withhold. It is his story to tell. So,
Girl, you giving me so many gems. Usually I find the gem that stands out, and I do like a short of that, or that's that preview. I'm gonna have a difficult time with this one. Picking that one gem out, because you have given so many, and I started to write them down, and I'm like, before I could write one down, you would say something else, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe not that one then. Okay, baby.
maybe we just need to have more conversations.
Right. So before I began recording, we were having a personal conversation, and we were talking about the Word of God. And she shared, we know the story of Peter getting out the boat, right? But Miss Chynna has had a revelation of this, and I want her to share this revelation with you guys.
So the scripture reference is Matthew 14:22 through 33. And it's the story of Jesus dismissing a crowd. He goes up to pray on the mountainside, sends the disciples ahead of him, and then he shows up on the water after they've already been traveling for a day or two. And Jesus is out walking on the water, tells the disciples not to be afraid. And then I think it's really important to read this part, if that's okay with you. So Peter says in verse 28, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come onto the water." And Jesus replies, "Come." It says, Peter then got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him and said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" The revelation that you mentioned, and I've preached on this a couple of times in the last couple of years. The part that got me when I was reading this, because we've heard it since we were kids, right? If you grew up in the church, you've heard this story. And we're always taught, or at least I had always been taught, that Peter got scared of the water, and that's why the waves, and he began to sink. But the scripture literally says, in almost every translation that you find, that Peter saw the wind and he was afraid. Can you see wind? No. You can see evidence of the wind, but you can't actually see the wind. And so why would something invisible scare Peter and put him in a state of doubt? And so the way that I see it, what God is trying to tell us here, or what the author is trying to tell us here, one of the things you have to understand about Peter is that he was a fisherman. He was described as a fisherman so that we would understand that he was a big, burly man who was fearless. To be a fisherman in that day and age, you'd have to be out in the middle of the ocean to be able to capture all of these fish. It is not a simple life. They're not out there just casting around, you know.
Right.
It's not a simple life. So it's giving us the imagery that he is a big, burly, not afraid of anything kind of guy. So for Peter, of all people, to get afraid of something that he cannot see, when he had an invitation to be on the water, Jesus gave him an invitation to come, get on the water with me, right? Peter asked for it. Jesus gave it to him. And then he allowed something he could not see to deter him from believing that he was out there, because Jesus had given him the invitation to be there. So my question to anyone who reads that, or to anyone who hears this, is, what is the wind in your life? What are the things that are stopping you or preventing you from believing that you have the invitation to do the thing that God has called you to do? God calls us out onto the water. Jesus called us out onto the water. But when we allow the wind to deter us, what is the wind? Is it the the stories from my childhood, the people who told me I couldn't do it? Is it the competition I feel with the person I work with? Is it the person who says I'm overqualified for whatever it is I'm applying for? Whatever that win might be, we have to understand that that wind is there to deter us. It is not there because Jesus asked us to be there. It's not there because God has put it there. It's there to deter us from whatever the invitation is that God has given us to do what we're called to do.
It's there to deter us from what God has called us out to do. Okay.
The end.
Okay. Okay.
So what is the wind in your life?
It's the wind. Yeah. I have something in my head right now. I'm thinking that could be it. So wow. I just thought the revelation was really good and that it could help somebody to continue to walk on the water, meaning the place that seems impossible to walk, but just remember that you were called to come. You were called to go to that certain position, that certain place, and that as long as you don't look to the left or the right, just keep looking to, ahead of you from where the call is coming from, and then you won't sink. Amen.
Amen. Come on, preach.
That was good. I wanted her to share that for somebody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming and allowing us to share some of your life with you, and to be able to feed somebody.
So
Yeah, I feel like this was meat for somebody.
thank you.
Yeah, and they needed to hear this. They are at that moment where, Lord, if you don't speak, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that you were able and willing to share your story for whoever hears this. Thank you. I appreciate you. Well, you guys, I am so thankful for you guys too. Again, I hope this blessed you all as much as it blessed me. Hey, welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Nicole. Have a great day. And remember, don't just have a great day, but make it a great day for somebody else.